On today's podcast, we sit down with Tom Truitt, Managing Director and Head of Music and Live Entertainment at Turnkey ZRG, one of the leading executive talent recruitment agencies for the entertainment industry. We discuss what various entertainment companies are looking for in executives that they didn't look for 4 or 5 years ago, how the corporate culture of a company determines who he sends for the job, his series, The Smartest People in the Room, and what areas of the music business have the greatest demand for executive talent today, and much, much more. You don't want to miss it. Insiders, are you ready? Welcome to MUBUTV's Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage artists and music business professionals who are dedicated to having a successful career in the new music industry. Here are your hosts, Rich Ezra and Eric Knight.
Welcome back, Insiders, to another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage your music career. On today's episode, we welcome Tom Truitt, Managing Director and Head of Music and Live Entertainment at Turnkey ZRG, a leading executive headhunting agency. We discuss the unique qualities companies look for in prospective hires that they didn't 4 or 5 years ago, how your personality factors into whether you're hired or not, and which areas have the greatest demand for executive talent in this era, and more. You can't afford to miss it. Welcome back, Insiders. Today's guest, we sit down with Tom Truitt, who is Managing Director and Head of Music and Live Entertainment at Turnkey ZRG, which is a leading executive headhunting agency. This was a really unique conversation because I've been wanting to talk to somebody on the inside to get a sense. We've never spoken to someone in this particular field before, and why I wanted to speak with him and why I thought this would be a good guest for us to talk with is because there's a whole different sensibility of the kind of person, the kinds of qualities, the necessary talents that you need to work in music today. And I wanted somebody who was going to be on the front lines for us.
Absolutely.
So he had a lot of very, very interesting things to talk about with regards to this subject, what people look for, what kinds of companies are hiring, what they're looking for in terms of experience, the new nature of music and entertainment that didn't exist 10, 15 years ago.
Also, I thought, Rich, how he spoke about the character elements he looks for, which I think is such an important thing. I mean, like you said at the top of the show, that it's such a unique area. We've never had somebody in this space. Yeah. I really didn't even know that there was a space like this because, you think about headhunters and you think about other industries. You don't see that in the music industry as much.
Right.
Which is interesting because now when I think back about it, when I got hired at Universal, I did go through a headhunting agency back then. So that was interesting how that whole worked out. But yeah, it's just interesting that he specializes specifically in that space.
Yeah, and what I thought was so interesting about it is not only that we talked about skill sets of what people look for, but characteristics of them as people. Who's going to work within that culture? Right. How he, as an executive headhunter, has to think of the culture of the company.
And how that character of that person is going to fit that.
Or not.
Exactly.
Because his role is to find the right fit for that particular company. And those are factors that you have to take into account. I guess, perhaps you always did, but they're kind of the, what we talk about with artists and A&R people. They're the non-creative qualities.
Which was my next point. You stole my thunder. Beyond experience, what are the non-spoken qualities he looks for in potential clients? I mean, it's like the same thing that we talk about in artists. What are those non-creative qualities? Yeah.
And you remember how he talked about, temperament, teamwork, working with others, all of those factors, it's no different than, when you talk about people that are looking for when managers and A&R people talk about the non-creative qualities they look for in artists. Did you show up on time?
Right.
Do you follow through on your word? Can you be trusted? Did you do what you said you were going to do? These are all very important things because he said, they matter. And when you're hiring somebody for a job, usually in an executive position, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of time, and usually...
And you better deliver on that.
Exactly. And if you can't, they'll find somebody else who can, not only in the position of the job, but also from Tom's position as well.
And with that, Insiders, sit back, relax, and enjoy our featured conversation with Tom Truitt.
Tom, welcome.
Hey, Rich, this is awesome. Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure.
Thank you so much for doing it. We really appreciate it. Tom, you're the managing director and head of music and live entertainment at Turnkey ZRG. Can you talk about your company and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a headhunter. I'm proud to use that term. A lot of people in my field don't like that term. They say I'm an executive recruiter. I'm a headhunter. I headhunt music executives broadly. In other words, I work in every lane of music you can name. I deal with companies on the live side of the industry, like Live Nation and AEG and Golden Voice, and companies like that around touring, production, ticketing, venues. In the recorded side of the industry, we deal with record labels, publishers, PROs, platforms for streaming, distribution. We even deal with nonprofits. I'm the luckiest guy you've ever met. I have no musical ability whatsoever, but I get paid well to go to concerts.
Okay, that sounds terrific. All right.
I love it.
Absolutely.
Hi, Tom. It's Eric. Thank you so much for doing this. Real honor to have you on the show. I wanted to ask you, as a veteran of executive recruitment, are there specific qualities that companies in the music industry look for in executives today that they didn't look for 4 or 5 years ago?
That's a great question. You know, you think about it, some of the titles in the music industry and frankly other areas of the economy didn't even exist 10 years ago. You know, this company called TikTok changed the game for a lot of the industry. Well, who's going to come along and displace TikTok? Or what's the next technology that, you know, for instance, head of playlisting. That's a title that never existed 10 years ago, but that's one of the most important titles, you know, in the business.
Yeah.
So who knows?
Yeah, at many of the companies.
So industries have been invented since then, which is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, when you're recruiting executive talent for a specific company, can you speak to how the corporate culture influences who you go after to recruit for that position?
Boy, that's a great question. And that's a black art. In other words, the cultural fit is one of the hardest things to determine. And in order to, I guess, nail it, I have to get myself immersed in the company culture before the search begins, or at least at the formative stages of it. Because I can produce great candidates all day long that have the right resume or the right educational pedigree, but if they don't culturally fit with the organization, we're going to have a long-term problem.
And how do you do that with the culture? Do you work with them?
Yeah, I will do a site visit and try to meet and frankly interview as many of the senior executives as possible. I like to walk around and just observe, immerse myself in the company for, a day or a half a day and just kind of check it out, get the vibe, and then go into the market and try to find the right people with the right, profiles, but then also the right vibe.
Have you ever, and you don't have to name names, but have you ever found yourself in a situation within your work where you were like, I don't want to get somebody for this company?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
Sometimes I can see that coming and maybe miss it and find myself doing a search that I kind of regret doing. But that only happens once. In other words, I won't do that again. I won't touch that hot stove twice. I've fired some clients before. In other words, after we started the search, we got into it, and I realized this is not going to work for either one of us. Why don't we just politely step aside and move on?
Okay.
It's not fun, but it's real.
No, absolutely. And I think it's important to see that, because a lot of times...
Right, there's not a good fit. Yeah.
It's not a good fit, and you got to acknowledge that.
Yep.
Very much so.
Can't jam a square peg into a round hole.
No.
Exactly. Tom, beyond the experience factors, what personal character elements do you look for in potential candidates today? Things that may not even ever be spoken about, but are very important.
You hit the word on the head, character. Character is trustworthiness, honorableness. In this day of remote work, can the employee be trusted to work diligently while no one's watching, no one's looking over their shoulder? And so it's really hard to measure that. And the way we assess that is not only in direct interviews, but also doing what I call off-the-record reference checks. In other words, when I come across a candidate for a job, I've been doing this long enough. I know plenty of people that know that person. And so I can go to my network and say, hey, this guy, Rich Ezra, what's the real skinny on that guy? Tell me about him.
I swear to God, Tom, I didn't. It was
So you say.
Exactly.
No,
right. Okay. Well, I mean, the hangnail. Never mind.
No, in all candor, it is. We want to vet a candidate 360 degrees. We want to know everything we can about them personally, professionally, emotionally, and in order to make a successful placement, it's got to check out on all sides, all angles.
And even after that, have you had things where you went through all the checks, everything went good, and then still it didn't work out, or it was a massive failure?
Not very often, but
Okay.
after doing this for 25 years, you're going to have a couple that bomb.
Yeah.
But we stand behind our work unconditionally. In other words, I guarantee a placement for 1 year. So, a client's got a 365-day insurance policy, and if we have to replace, we will replace. I can count on 3 fingers the number of times I've had to do that, but
Yeah.
it happens.
Let me ask you, you sort of triggered an interesting point when you were talking about the different levels that you use and go to check somebody out. With the world that we live in today, in terms of getting information on people, it's astonishingly more easy to really delve into getting information on people, whether it's through social media or through different kinds of metrics that exist out there that didn't 10, 15 years ago. Do you find that helps you in your particular job?
Absolutely. Yeah, not only does it help us identify candidates, but then also track them down and then to vet them, because we can look at their digital footprint, see what kind of crazy things they've posted on their Facebook page or Instagram. Companies don't want to hire someone that's going to present their company in a bad light. I tell people all the time, scrub your social media. Don't post something that you wouldn't be proud to have your grandmother see.
Yeah. And that's very real. I mean, we've seen careers in so many areas, in show business and politics, and what get derailed by that kind of thing,
Especially among younger people. Younger
Yes.
people think they're being clever and cute by posting something. In reality, it's very offensive. It's going to piss someone off.
Right. And they don't realize the ramifications years down the road of what that's going to do to their reputation.
That's right. That's right. I preach this to my own children all the time. I think they've heard me.
The words that you use will be held against you, whether it's in a court of law or the court of public opinion.
Well, I remember hearing, I guess it was 6, 7 years ago, this major case where an insurance company found that the client was being fraudulent in that they were claiming, what's the word, disability. They were getting money for disability, and then the insurance company looked at the social media, and he's at the gym doing weight lifts. He's out on the Colorado River, the next week with carrying the boat. There was no, and this was all brought in to the case to prove, Your Honor.
Right.
And so, I'm just saying, so much of our footprint in life, both digitally, what we say, what we do. It's like everybody knows what you do online. That's why you get the ads for the shoes if you were looking at shoes. And I just wondered if that really helps your work. And obviously it does.
Yeah, and a lot of people like to inflate their resume. In other words, you'll see on someone's LinkedIn profile that they state they have a degree from a certain school. And in reality, if you delve in deeper, they attended that school, but maybe didn't graduate.
Right, so there's no degree.
I have to call them out on that sometimes. It's painful.
Okay. From your position, what areas of the music business have the greatest demand for executive talent today?
I'd say the live side of the industry. You follow the money. And so since streaming has come on in the last 10, 15 years, record labels are not hiring with the frequency that they once did, because most artists make more money from touring these days. In the old days, you put your record out and then you tour to support that. Well, that's completely reversed now. Your record is to support your tour, because that's where they make their money. Consequently, the live industry is where most of the activity for me exists.
In terms of hiring people. And when you look at Live Nation, how they came back financially over the last year and a half is staggering. Just unbelievable.
Well, Live Nation, a lot of people like to call them the Death Star Frankly, they're one of the smartest companies on earth. Michael Rapino has vertically integrated that company in such an intelligent way. They're incredible. They really are.
Yeah, there was an interesting piece, I'm sure you saw it, that Bob Lefsetz linked to about, that everybody thinks it's Live Nation that sets the concert ticket prices. And it's not. It's the artist and the management. They're the ones that set that, not Live Nation. They're
That's
not
right.
the ones doing that. And Live Nation also, they got the message, and they're doing those all-in tickets where there's no service. No, if it says $50, it's $50.
Right.
Not $82. So, yeah.
Well, and a lot of people don't like the all-in. In other words, they like to hide those fees. Some of the entrants in that place. In other words, when you buy a ticket, there's a lot of charges that are buried in there that cover the promoter, cover the venue, cover the artist, cover the manager. You're complaining to Ticketmaster because that's where you're buying the ticket, but Ticketmaster's the one that's, taking the heat for all those other players. And Bob is absolutely correct. It's the artist that is perhaps the most greedy in the whole equation. And God bless them. They should be. If we didn't have the artist, we'd have no show. So
Right.
They should be able to charge whatever the heck they want to.
And a lot of them do. They just don't want it known. It's an image issue more than anything, that particular point you're making. It's an image issue.
But at the end of the day, it's supply and demand. And there's a whole lot of people that have a lot of money that will spend it, to go to have that first-class experience, sit on the front row, have the backstage experience. God bless them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's what the market bears.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. Tom, how has the rise of gaming and esports influenced the integration of music and entertainment, and what opportunities do you see emerging in this sector for work?
Gaming is such a larger entertainment platform than music. It's 3 times as large. Everyone thinks music is so big and pervasive, and it is, but gaming's 3x.
Yep.
Music is going to continue to be integrated into gaming, and there's opportunities for artists to make money from having their music synced into games. That's great, but honestly, I think it's a little overblown. Everyone thought that was going to be the end-all, be-all. It's not. It's another outlet for artists' popular music. But if an artist thinks that's their path to lifetime wealth, it's not. It's one avenue.
Yeah, it's one vertical in many.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Tom, can you elaborate on the impact of technology, particularly SAAS platforms, on the music industry landscape and how it's influencing talent acquisition and business strategies in your line of work?
Wow, that's a loaded
SaaS,
word.
and that's SaaS.
SaaS.
Software as a service.
Yes.
That's right. So how has SaaS impacted companies and their hiring?
Yeah.
Rich, I don't have an opinion on that one.
Okay.
That's a really unusual question. SaaS is being applied in so many other areas of the economy, but I don't have much to say on that one, honestly.
Okay. All right.
So, Tom, given your experience with Who Knew and the Smartest People in the Room series, what have been some of the most valuable insights that you've learned from various industry icons?
Wow, how much time do we have for that one?
Plenty of time. Go for it.
So a little history. Who Knew was a live event series that I started on a dare in 2015. It was loosely patterned after the New York Tech Meetup, which, if you all remember the concept of meetup in the aughts and the early teens, meetup was a thing, and the New York Tech Meetup was the granddaddy of them all. Yep. It was a very popular monthly event in New York City. They sold 2,000 tickets for $30 a piece, and it would sell out in minutes. And the reason it was so popular, it was a tech entrepreneur's dream event. In other words, they would select 12 entrepreneurs, give them 5 minutes each to be on stage pitching their wares, their new apps or their new devices or websites. And if you got on that stage, you had arrived because you were talking to the New York tech community. You were talking to potential investors and partners and employees and things like that. Well, a buddy of mine, you may know Jim Griffin. Jim's one of my music industry heroes and mentors, and Jim had been to the New York Tech meetup in April of that year, and he came back and said, Truitt, you need to launch something like that in Nashville focused on music. And I was like, I don't have time for this right now. Jim, leave me alone. Honestly, every time Jim tells me to do something, if I just do it, it works out really well. So I started studying the New York Tech meetup. I watched their videos, and I realized, okay, I don't want a pitch event. I like stories. I'm on the board of TEDx Nashville. I like TED Talks. Tell me a story, but don't pitch me something. And so I took the New York Tech meetup model and sort of flipped it upside down. Rather than 12 speakers, 5 minutes each, I gave 5 speakers 12 minutes each to tell me their story about where they came from, about their origin story, and what they've done in their careers and their lives. And so I had my first event in January of 2015, and I had no idea if anyone would care or would come. I sold tickets on Twitter for $10 a piece, and 180 people showed up. And we were like, wow, well, let's do that again. Did one in April. 3 months later, 325 people showed up for that one. And I realized at that moment, all right, we've got something here. Let's keep going. Well, I did 38 of them over the ensuing 4.5 years. Until COVID came into our lives. And when COVID arrived, all bets for live events were off. I knew that immediately. And I was very fortunate to pivot into an online webinar format immediately. In April of 20, right when COVID was roaring, or starting to roar, Jim and I got together and said, all right, let's try a webinar. And Twitch was a thing at that moment in time. And we had Jim interview Karen Allen, who is a Twitch expert. And we had about 500 people register for that webinar. And we were like, all right, this might work. Let's do it again. And so fast forward through to today, I've done about 220 of them. It's been a who's who of the music industry. And, you know, one of my favorite moments in the whole series took place in June of 20. At that time, I was doing these webinars. I was hosting my part of it from live music venues in Nashville because they needed a little bit of love. They were in shutdown mode. And so that day I was fortunate to be broadcasting from none other than the Ryman stage, the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, which is the best music venue on earth for my money, but I'm biased. And that day I had Bob Lefsetz interview Mark Geiger.
I remember it well. That's how I first met you.
Well, I'm telling you, that event was seminal in a way because about 10 minutes into it, Geiger fires the shot heard round the world. And Geiger said, we're not going to have any live music until the end of 21 at the earliest. And there was like, holy shit, did he just say 18 months we're going to be dark? Because at that time, everyone was thinking, we're going to be dark for 2 weeks, 2 months. Geiger fired that, and it was like, holy shit. If he thinks that, what is coming? Well, as it turns out, he was absolutely right.
Right.
He's so prescient.
He is in so many ways, but yeah.
He's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Bob Lefsetz is one of my heroes, too.
Yeah.
Bob calls it like it is. You know, I love the way he approaches what he does. But anyway, the smartest people in the room is the smartest thing I've ever done. It allows me to feature really cool people doing what they do. And you know, I've had everyone who's anyone in the business do it. I'm so blessed. I've met so many cool people doing it, and I love doing it. It's my passion project. It really is.
It's such a great series, and you know when COVID came, I think the interesting thing for you, I would think, is that it no longer became a localized event where your access of who was available to Tom became literally anyone and anywhere. They could be in New York, they could be in California, they could be in Nashville, they could be in Europe.
You're exactly right.
You know, and so your scope broadened.
And my go time is 2 p.m. Eastern. And the reason I selected that time is when this launched in COVID, we were all in lockdown in our respective dwellings. Middle of the day was as good as middle of the morning. Well, as it turns out now, the wisdom of that time is that time allows LA and London to tune in live. And the live aspect of the smartest people in the room is the secret sauce of it. While it's a two-way conversation between the two executives on camera, if you will, there's a very active chat that takes place. And so the questions and the commentary in that chat are what allow the audience to feel like they're really part of the conversation. It's not a podcast. God bless you guys for doing a podcast. You all know better than anybody how much work a podcast is.
Yes, we do.
I don't have that patience, that bandwidth. I'm just not wired that way. I like the live event of smartest people in the room.
Do it and it's over. Live with it,
No editing. Put it on YouTube. And
live without a net.
Right, it's live without a net,
Exactly.
When it's over, it's over. Mm-hmm. It's in the past. Yeah, there's no fixing it. What do you foresee as the most significant challenges and opportunities facing the music industry today from your perspective?
Well, that's another loaded one. When you say the industry,
the music industry.
Yeah, are you saying like the individual songwriters, or are you saying the companies like Live Nation, or everything in between? Because
everything in between.
Yeah, at the end of the day, some elements of the music industry are thriving right now. Record labels are producing profits at the highest rate ever. Record revenues, all on the back of streaming. Live companies like Live Nation and AEG are printing money. But the songwriters, the ones that are producing the actual widgets in the machine, they're the ones that are really hurting right now because of the way the payment structures are designed. So while the industry can appear to be very, very lucrative and very healthy, there's some real bad parts of it. And it's the songwriters who are the ones that are really hurting more than anyone else.
It seems like a lot has not changed. It's the same struggle that we've had as, creatives all our lives. Songwriters is always getting the shit end of the deal.
Well, at least in the days where people were buying records, songwriters made a good living.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
When that went away, unfortunately, wow.
I think there's another element to this as well, which is I don't disagree with what you said, but I think the other element is that we're in a reality in 2024 where far, far more songwriters and more money is being made, but it's going to a lot more people. And I think that's the difference. I think when you look back at the old model, if you were one of the chosen, the blessed, the few that got signed to a publishing deal and had a hit record, you're right. You made a lot of money on that hit record. And the fact that there was a sales component of a copy model to sell, you made money. Now we live in a world where I think a lot more money is being made in music publishing and in songs and in royalties than in the 80s, 90s, or even the early 2000s. Like you just pointed out, the amount of money on streaming. But it's going to so many more people. So it's all being diluted. When you look at hit records today, they're not going to a writer. They're going to 7 writers and 7 publishers. So I remember doing a panel with Marty Bandier years ago, and he pointed out, he said, I'm on one of the biggest hits of the decade, a song called Uptown Funk. But he said, my guy has 7%. 7% of the song, of which he is splitting with me. So, there's a lot of money in that pot, but I'm getting as opposed to like in the days when I represented one of the writers and we got 50%, you know what I'm saying? So
right.
I think that's another component to what you're both talking about. I don't disagree, and I think that these things do need to be addressed in terms of payments and streaming payments and so forth. But there's also that reality that a lot more people, more songwriters, are making money, maybe not a living, but making money than in the old model.
Another element that's interesting is think about the democratization of the creation of music.
Yes.
In the old days, you had to, to make a record, you had to go into a studio. You had to, spend a lot of money to get musicians together and producers and mixers and engineers. Well, today you can do that in your bedroom with a souped-up MacBook Pro and Pro Tools. And so while you see some of these kids producing supposed hit records in their bedroom, Billie Eilish is a great example.
Very much so.
Here's one of the most important figures in the entire industry who started making music in her bedroom, and voila.
Yeah.
That couldn't have happened in the 70s, 80s, 90s.
The technology didn't exist for that. Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Tom, Let me ask you, are there any films or books that have particularly been inspirational to you, professionally speaking, that you could recommend to our audience?
Yes. Peter Shapiro's book, which I had a chance to review with Peter last year, is one of the best reads. Peter Shapiro, if your audience doesn't know, is modern-day Bill Graham. Peter Shapiro is one of my heroes, and he has the Brooklyn Bowl. He's the guy who got the Grateful Dead back together for Fare Thee Well, and he produced delivered a book last year. It's kind of his life story, but it's chock full of lessons about the music industry, the live industry particularly. That's a really important read for anyone in the live side of the industry.
That's the first recommendation we've had on that book. So,
yeah, very much so. So we'll
share that
definitely with our audience on that one.
It's called The Music Never Stops.
Yep.
What advice would you be willing to offer to aspiring professionals who are looking to break into the music and live entertainment industry, particularly in light of the evolving trends and technologies that we've spoken of today?
Go into healthcare.
Okay.
No, I'm asked this question frequently.
Yeah.
And most of us in this industry are in it for the passion. I tell people all the time, you can make a lot more money in other areas of the economy than the music business. So be careful what you ask for. And the reason for that is so many young people come into this industry assuming they're going to be hanging out with Mick Jagger and Bono. They assume they're going to become the next Clive Davis. And the fact of the matter is very, very few of those people are ever going to achieve that level of notoriety and success. Consequently, the supply and demand for the jobs in the lower end of the music industry is also way out of whack. You've got so many music business programs from, you mentioned Bandier at Syracuse,
Yep.
one of the best programs
Belmont.
going,
Yeah.
Belmont, MTSU, USC,
UCLA,
Georgia.
yeah.
Berkeley.
There's dozens of these fantastic schools, and they continue to mint new grads every year. But the fact of the matter is there's not that many jobs available. So a lot of these kids are paying, $75, $175, $300,000 to get this music business degree. And then they've got to struggle to find an unpaid internship, initially at least, to get in the door, to classically work in the mailroom and then start working their way up. Well, that's a tough economic equation to square because you've spent $300,000 on your education and you're making $10 an hour.
Yeah.
That's hard. So at the end of the day, you've got to be in the business for the right reason, and that's the passion. And passion will carry you through a lot of ups and downs. But if you're in it just for the money, I don't recommend that.
Yeah, especially
Because
today.
you make more money elsewhere.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, Billboard, going back to a point you made earlier, Billboard magazine did this incredible piece, and I shared with my students in Musicians Institute, called 33 New Jobs in the Music Industry That Didn't Exist. I think it was 4 years ago or 5 years ago. And it was astonishing, like what you were saying, like the amount of new kinds of things in streaming. And then even within the traditional businesses, CAA hiring a branding person, CAA hiring somebody to do something with their clients in sports that the sport agent just didn't do in the past. But getting specific, granular elements, even within the traditional roles of these companies. Sony Music, I think, was one that did, brand opportunities, not brand opportunities, but integration with sports, for example. So working with NFL, working with the NBA, but specifically just sports. If it was a large enough roster, that would make sense. So it is interesting in that, to your point that there's not the jobs, but there's a lot of new and innovative small things that are growing that probably will be.
And AI. And AI is
yeah.
going to, I think, change a lot of things too now with that. So
in terms of education, are you seeing a AI element having to deal with that in terms of what's being required, like knowledge? Or Tom, we want somebody who has some kind of understanding of this or is on that level of where it's going or what's going on with that. Do you get that?
Yeah, most of the jobs I'm touching are not hardcore technical jobs, but at the end of the day, AI is baked into every single thing that we're doing these days.
Yeah.
I mean, not just in music and entertainment.
Yeah. I think that's going to create more new industries within our field for sure.
Yeah. We had the CEO yesterday of one of the really big tech companies here, and he was saying that there are, Apple and all of the phone manufacturers are coming with AI phones. It's not like in the future, like
It's
2024,
here. Yeah,
it's
it's coming.
here. And he said, the prototypes and the models and the features that they have, he says, is unbelievable incorporating this. So it's,
Exciting.
it's very exciting. Very exciting.
It's helped our business from an efficiency standpoint. We're leveraging AI. Absolutely. And if you're not, honestly, you're either you have your head in the sand or you're clueless.
Absolutely. Tom, we want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. This has been fun. I appreciate what you guys do.
Thank you.
And I am in awe of anyone that can do it at the scale that you do it.
Oh,
So
Thanks so much.
appreciate you having me. This has been a pleasure.
thank you. Thank you so much.
Right on.
Wow, that was really interesting. As I thought it would be. So many interesting points that he brought up. I mean, I love the fact when he spoke about some of the things that we didn't even anticipate, which is like the rise of people needed for gaming and esports.
Yeah,
that's very, very prescient in today's world.
Yeah, because it's become such a huge part of the culture of that whole world. It's become such a big business.
Oh, God,
and
yes.
so they're looking for executives and people of that nature. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I also thought it was interesting to hear what he learned from the guest on his web series, The Smartest People in the Room. That's an interesting series that you talked about with him that he was doing. I think it was during the pandemic. And
he started it.
Yeah, and it became very popular, and I think you heard some of those episodes during that time, I believe.
I did. The very first one, I got turned on to it during the pandemic when Bob Lefsetz did a conversation with Mark Geiger. Mark is the guy who was who formed a company during the pandemic to help save live venues.
Right.
And if you follow the world of live music, especially in smaller clubs, 75 to 80% of clubs in this country are independently owned. They're not, owned by Live Nation or AEG.
Right.
And that's a huge percentage. And if you read up on this, the scene in England is really, hurting badly. And so I listened to that, and it was quite an interesting conversation. What he talks about in the series is he gets two people together who are basically having a conversation about, themselves, their careers, the business, and, it flows, evenly back and forth. I myself have been a guest on the show that he had, and there's a lot of very interesting people from all facets of entertainment, from sports, from video games, from music, from live entertainment. It's really interesting, and I recommend it because if people are interested in hearing about those particular worlds from those within it, definitely you want to check that out.
Yeah, and one of the other areas that I thought was what he saw as the most significant challenges and opportunities facing the music industry today, which I thought were very interesting.
Yes, absolutely. We, this is like, we had a guest, Gary Chen, who
from
talked
All
about,
Saints,
from All Saints, who talked about a lot of the transformations and changes that are going to be coming. And yeah, definitely. I thought, the points that Tom made about the changes that we're going to see, the demands that are going to be asked for, it's really going to be a very, very exciting time and one of complete transformation of our business.
Hey, Insiders, thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We really appreciate it. To get show notes, links, and everything that was mentioned during this interview, head on over to our official website at MUBUTV.com/podcast/show notes. If you're enjoying the content and what we're doing here on the show, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts from. And don't forget to rate and review our show at iTunes. 5-star reviews are always welcome and help to ensure that our podcast stands out on the top-rated and new and noteworthy charts on iTunes and our space. You can also find us at social media at Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter X, all ending with the handle MUBUTV, which is spelled MUBUTV. Don't forget to catch our flagship show, the MUBUTV Music Business Insider video series, airing every week on YouTube at youtube.com/MUBUTV. This show was produced and created by Rich Ezra and Eric Knight. Theme music by Disciples of Babylon, and be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast.